Welcome to our 2-Acre World. Today we're going to be talking about genealogy and how it relates to homesteading. I'm sure we can all relate to how when our grandparents started talking about back in my day stories, we kind of tuned them out. And then years later, we had questions to ask them and they weren't around to answer. That's why it's important to write down what's going on in your day-to-day life, not only for yourself, for your homestead, for your records, but so those stories can be passed on to future generations. My great-grandmother kept a diary, which she later put into a book. She'd intended it to be for her children and her grandchildren, but I don't think that very many of them actually read it. But I do appreciate that everybody preserved the words that she put down, that I have them today to tell me of what life was like in the early 1900s. Homesteading can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can be just a couple of plants on your patio, a garden that you're growing for your family, or a huge farm where you can take care of several families. The thing is that we all start someplace and we all have more things that we can learn.
What was it really like for our forefathers homesteading? I began to explore the answer to this question with my genealogy. By studying my people, I can learn from their successes and their failures. These are my great-grandparents at 60 years old, still working the homestead, which when they started was nothing but a sod house on the Kansas prairie. I am very fortunate. I have over a dozen close relatives who wrote autobiographies. I am an old wife. As a matter of fact, I'm older than the state of Alaska, so I can tell old wives' tales. But none of these are. All of the stories I share today actually happened to my people. All of the photos are of our family. All of my Bible verses come from the New King James Bible. Most people start their genealogy research with the census. It's important to read every line of the census. Is your family member the farm owner or a hired hand? Is there other family living nearby or in the same house? Working a farm is a lot of work, and you would get as much help as you can whenever you can. Just because you can't find hired hands in your research doesn't mean they did it all themselves. They would have had migrant workers. I love this trailer that the migrant workers lived in as they went from farm to farm. When it was time for a harvest to be cut, baled, or sent to a grain mill, other farmers, your neighbors, helped out. Not everyone had the farm equipment necessary to bring in wheat. In 1880, my great-great-grandfather joined interest with a friend and operated one of the first threshing machines. They were busy men going from one farm to another, threshing small grains. The 1900 census showed my great-grandmother having attended school 54 months in her 14 years of life. But her 12-year-old sister attended school 86 months. Flora did not stay home because she was ill. She stayed home because she had 7 younger siblings to take care of. It wasn't just boys that missed out on school to work on the farm. 1910 census. Frank St. Clair, age 37, hired my great-granduncle, Charles Simpson, age 45, to help work on his farm. Frank was my great-great-grandfather, whose daughter married my great-granduncle's brother, who became my great-grandfather. I am sometimes amazed by the notions that people have about life on a farm. They think that roosters only crow at sunrise. They don't know that they will also crow at 3 in the morning when a weasel is after the hens. That is his job, after all. They think that they can do it all with just a husband and wife, raising crops and livestock. You can't do it all. They couldn't do it all in 1850 either. You need help. In 1909, my great-grandmother wrote, "There is so much of the work that I cannot do it all alone." Even with the household chores, that great-grandmother sewed and baked bread, while another grandmother preferred gardening and canning. My great-grandmother didn't get a washing machine until 1913. All of her laundry had to be done by hand with a washboard. My other grandmother preferred the washboard for really tough stains. There are people who have no idea what a spring house is. It's just a small shed with a stream running through it where pioneers would keep milk and butter cool without ice. My great-great-grandparents had one on the Kansas prairie. My great-grandfather, whose house he built with his own hands, still stands in Manhattan Beach. It is the second oldest home in the city. He put in a California cooler, which was a cabinet in the house that had slatted shelves open to the basement, and with convection it allowed cool air to rise and keep perishables fresh. My great-grandmother Flora, who lived from 1885 to 1966, interviewed her mother Ladora, 1860 to 1952, on memories of her life. Ladora remembered her grandfather William, 1796 to 1868, who lived not far from their home, and that as a small child she often went to his house, and that his wife would say, "William, while you are resting, can't you do the churning for me?" Idleness does not have a place on a homestead. Reading her words made me feel as if I could almost touch my great-great-great-great-grandfather. In my great-great-grandmother's home stood the great loom and spinning wheel, where they spun cotton into yarn and wove the cloth to make their own clothes. People today think that homespun cloth refers to a material that is kind of rough-looking, but it was an actual thing. Their home on this farm was about 20 foot square, built of cottonwood logs from the river which ran across the farm. The house was roofed with logs and covered with dirt and sod. How they had room in that house for a loom and spinning wheel is beyond me. You will often hear people say, "Well, people were much smaller 100 years ago," and their evidence is clothing that has survived and the size of the house. Have you ever brought down a tree with just a saw and an axe? I have. It's a lot of hard work. I can absolutely see someone saying, "I can stoop to come into the house, and I don't need to put up another row of logs." I have seen log houses built with a step down into the house. They would do this for two reasons. One, the earth would keep the home cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And two, that was a row or two of logs that you didn't have to cut. As far as clothing goes, when someone outgrows a dress or dies, their clothing is passed on to the next person. It is often said to look at the fashion a person is wearing in a photo to date it. Well, I have a cape in my closet that I bought in 1975, and I still wear it. My granddaughter wears dresses that I made for her mother. So average size clothing is worn until it is worn out. Small size clothing that didn't have anyone to go to was put in a trunk to wait until someone needed it, or it was cut up and made into a quilt. My family in Kansas in 1875 planted an Osage orange hedge around their apple orchard to break the hot south winds. Chuck is putting up a pallet fence around our garden to protect it from the winds that blow here in central Arizona. My great-great-grandpa in 1895 homesteaded 260 acres of land that each settler was entitled to if he would live on it and farm it for 5 years. I'll bet a lot of your ancestors did the same thing. The federal government no longer gives out land under the Homestead Act. It was repealed in 1976 for most of the country, and in 1986 for Alaska. Some towns still offer free or discounted land to attract new residents. Starting out, Proverbs 28:19. He who tills his land will have plenty of bread. It was said that my great-great-granduncle was a genius in producing vegetables in his garden in Kansas. He built a small dam on the Saline River and planted his garden below it and irrigated it from the dam. A wagon load of manure on the garden grounds in the fall for rich, fertile loam in the spring. I put manure on our garden in the fall when I put the garden to bed. The snow and ice break down the manure, so it's available for the plants in the spring. One man alone cannot be a pioneer, as the virgin soil of Kansas was hard to break. I have read several times variations of the same story. 4 years of drought and crop failure, taking a job in town, then buying another farm and starting over again. But they learned from their mistakes and how to combat natural problems. So where can we go for information? Grange. My grandfather went to Grange meetings to learn more about homesteading. One of the things he had was an almond tree with 5 different varieties grafted on it. We don't have any Grange meetings where we live anymore. If you still have them, hang on to them and try to keep them going. Can you find information on the internet? Sure. But is it true? What if we no longer had the internet? Boy Scouts. There is an organization that has lost touch with its roots. At one time, Chuck's grandfather believed so much in the organization, he introduced scouting to the country of Costa Rica. Boys need a place to be with just boys, as well as girls need a place to be with just girls. The merit badges available include animal science, cooking, emergency prep, farm mechanics, gardening, forestry. The list goes on and on. But try to get your hands on some of the older merit badge booklets, like Agribusiness, last offered in 1995, Beekeeping, 1955, Corn Farming and Dairying, 1975. Merit badges have changed. Most of them are easier too. Too easy. The automotive maintenance merit badge has changed. I remember my brother had to calibrate a timing belt. My son had to change tires and oil. Now, they check windshield wiper fluid and check for proper operation of lights, explain several things, but not really do the work. 1877. My great-grandmother at age 5, along with her siblings and parents, joined a caravan of covered wagons to leave Illinois and head west toward Kansas. Now, I recall in the 1970s hearing time and time again how a squirrel could climb a tree on the East Coast and hop from tree to tree, never touching the ground until it reached the West Coast. But then evil, greedy men chopped down all the trees, leaving the land barren. Yet in 1877, my 5-year-old great-grandmother mentioned several times the prairies they crossed without any trees in sight. My great-grandmother continues in her autobiography. The family did miss the large trees and beautiful foliage of Illinois. There was nothing to shelter the house from the blazing sun, and no place to comfort the children for playing in the yard. We must set out some young trees, my great-great-grandfather told his wife, just as soon as we can get them. Whether we're in this place later on or not, the next family will appreciate them. After all, setting out trees is just another way of developing the land. So when is the best time to plant a tree? 15 years ago and today. Here is a photo of my son when he was about 5. Behind him is a redwood tree that my mom planted in Redlands, California. This is the same tree with my daughter standing by it about 20 years later. You may be thinking, I have bare land. Where do I start? Here's an example. My grandparents bought this property in 1947. There is nothing there. Absolutely nothing. 25 years later, you can see the size of the avocado trees behind them that they had planted. Those trees were massive. I spent many a summer climbing them. Cost of things. John 14:27. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. March 1908. My great-grandmother got a chance to buy 15 dozen fresh eggs for $1.50. She put them in a lime solution to keep them for later on when egg prices would go higher. Putting eggs in a lime solution is an old idea that is becoming popular again. 1911. My great-grandmother dressed 12 young chickens and took them to a restaurant. This bunch weighed 22 pounds. At 28 cents a pound, she realized they only received $6.15 for 12 fryers. After all the expense of feed bills and her hard work, she wondered if raising chickens really paid. Chuck and I like watching home renovation shows, but it irritates me to no end when someone says, "Oh, you only paid X number of dollars for this house 50 years ago," and they don't take into account how much the average income was 50 years ago. For example, we figured it cost my great-grandfather $10,000 to $12,000 to build a 2,200 square foot house in Manhattan Beach, California in about 1925. Today, according to Zillow, that same house is worth $3 million. Now, according to the census, the average annual income in 1915 was $687. My great-grandfather sold a 4-year-old Jersey milk cow for $60 in 1917. That works out to 8.73% of a yearly income. Today, according to the U.S. Jersey Journal, a Jersey milk cow costs about $2,000. The average income today, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is $62,000. That same cow costs you 3% of your income. While the value of my great-grandfather's house went up exponentially, the value of a Jersey cow went down. Less people tend to have a cow, and more people want to live blocks from the beach. But saving that silly little ephemera from my genealogy gave me another clue into the life of my ancestors. My great-grandmother traded garden vegetables and eggs for sugar and flour. She received 5 and 6 cents a dozen for eggs, although in the winter months, the price went up to 10 cents. This was 1896. Sometimes it was not just the cost of something, but the inability to get more of it. My great-great-great-grandfather would dig up the soil in the smokehouse and would wash the salt out of it so he could use the salt again.
Okay, that's all that we have time for today. Next time, we're going to pick up with the subject of disasters.
A simple life.